can do this physically. You can invite me to Kuwait. Why not?
Yeah, sure, inshallah. Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala nabiy al-amin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yawmiddin, amma ba'd. Distinguished guest, my dear brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to welcome you to our this weekly lecture on reflections on the displaced commercial risk. And today our guest speaker is a global expert in the Islamic banking and finance areas, Dr. Mustafa Disli from University, Hamad bin Khalifa University. So as you all know that our Nadal Iqtisad al-Islami of the Kuwait University is arranging and organizing programs, lectures, talks, workshops, especially on the topics and areas related to Islamic banking and finance and Islamic insurance, capital market, equity market, and also we focus on some specific topics like contemporary topics like sukuk and retail and corporate banking products, fintech, and some other practical contemporary issues. So today we are very much honored to have Dr. Mustafa Disli, who is an assistant professor of Islamic Economics and Finance, College of Islamic Studies, Hamad bin Khalifa University, Qatar. Dr. Mustafa received his bachelor degree in economics and master's in economics as well. And he has second master in banking and finance. Dr. Mustafa also obtained his PhD from Ghent University in Belgium. And his research areas and interests are in the areas of Islamic banking and finance, energy, sustainable economics, and behavioral economics and finance. Dr. Disli has published across a number of peer-reviewed journals, including economics modeling, energy economics, renewable and sustainable energy reviews, and also in Journal of Comparative Economics, Journal of Financial Services Research, Journal of Financial Stability, and World Economy. So this is our honor to welcome Dr. Mustafa Disli to conduct this lecture on the reflections on displaced commercial risk. So please welcome Dr. Mustafa.
All right, good to be here, Dr. Muhammad. Can I share my screen?
Yes, doctor.
Good.
Yeah. It's perfect. Yeah.
All right. So my camera is on, right?
Your camera is not on.
Okay, let me. Actually, okay, now it's better.
Now it's on. Yeah. Okay.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي يسر ولا تعسر. ربي تمم بخير. So I first would like to thank Dr. Muhammad Muhyiddin for inviting me for the second time this year. So probably the attendees of the first session will still remember that the topic of that talk was about market discipline in Islamic banking. And today I will talk about displaced commercial risk. So more specifically, I will explain what this risk is. I will show you some empirical evidence, And finally, I will question the statement that this risk is unique to Islamic banks. So it is just, I want to open a discussion about this. To be honest, there is no empirical evidence about my conjecture about this, but it will be good to have a discussion about this as well. So, so today's topic is reflections on displaced commercial risk. If you look at the classical Islamic banking and finance textbooks, so they typically mention that Islamic banks have some unique risk features that distinguishes them from conventional banks. So these risks, let me check whether I can, yes, these risks are claimed to be in addition to the risks that are shared by both Islamic and conventional banks. What are those risks? Those are these generic risks. So the generic risks that are shared both by Islamic and conventional banks are the credit, market, liquidity, and operational risks. However, so those textbooks, they mention that there are unique risks that are only shared by Islamic banks. So you have the rate of return risk, which is the focus of our talk today. You have the Sharia non-compliance risk. This is the risk when a bank fails to comply with the principles of the Sharia. And you also have the equity investment risk, which is also unique to Islamic banks. So this is the risk of losing part of your investment because you enter into a partnership through either the mudaraba, which is the silent partnership, or the musharaka agreement, which is the active partnership. As mentioned, so the focus of today is the rate of return risk, and more precisely, its consequences, which is embodied by this displaced commercial risk. In addition, you have the withdrawal risk, but they are all interrelated with each other. So this is the focus of today's talk. So what is the rate of return risk? So this is the risk that an increase in the benchmark rates, which are the conventional rates, by the way, may result in investment account holders having expectations of having a higher rate of return. Let me give you an example. For example, an Islamic bank is expected to earn 4% on its assets. And suppose that the bank will pass this entirely through its investors and depositors. However, if the current market rates increase from 4 to 5%, so which is actually higher than what the bank will make from its investment, what will be the consequence? The holders of these investment account deposits, they will expect 5% as well. So it is putting the Islamic bank actually in a corner. So they are forced to follow. They are forced to follow the conventional rates. So the consequence of the rate of return risk is the displaced commercial risk. So this means what? So from a bank's perspective, the bank forgoes parts. So the bank forgoes part of its share of profit in order to retain, in order to keep these depositors with the bank. So they will actually give part of their own profits. They will transfer that. They will transfer that to the investment account holders as such that the investment account holders remain with the bank. And of course, as such that they also don't withdraw their money out of the bank, which is the withdrawal risk. As said earlier, those risks are all interrelated with each other, and they are actually the derivation from the rate of return risk, the displaced commercial and the withdrawal risk. Now, how do banks deal with this? How do banks deal in practice with this displaced commercial risk? So what they do in practice is they put aside reserves. And there are two reserves in this regard. The first reserve is called the profit equalization reserve. So this means what? That the bank set aside a portion of the total income. So the bank set aside a portion of the total income before allocating its share as the mudarib or the working partner. Now, you have to see this. It might sound a little bit confusing, but with the next slide, it will become much more clear. But it is, don't forget that an investment account holder enters into a what? Enters into a mudaraba agreement. A mudaraba agreement means that the profits are shared between the working partner, which is the bank, and the depositor, which is the silent partner or the capital provider. So the profits are shared between them, but the losses are entirely borne by the capital provider, by the depositors. So from this context, actually, this is, as you can see, this is about the profits. The profits. And this is borne by both, right? Like the capital provider as well as the bank. So therefore, this amount, this reserve is put aside before giving the share of both the bank as well as the depositor. While the second one, it is about the investment risk. It is the amount maintained out of the income of investment account holders. So this is putting aside a reserve for the losses. Of course, it is about losses, hence the losses are borne by whom? By the depositors. So this is borne entirely by whom? By the investment account holders. So that is somewhat the logic, but let me explain you this with an example. For example, so there is this profit, right? The mudaraba profit. This is in Qatari riyals, but this can be expressed in every monetary unit, currency unit. So suppose that the profit is 1 million riyal. So the profit equalization reserve is borne by both the bank as well as the depositor. So suppose that it is 5%, which is 50,000 out of 1 million. So the balance is 950,000. And then suppose that out of this mudaraba agreement, the bank's share is 25%. So the bank keeps this. The bank actually calculates its profits based on this balance. The investor's shares of profits are calculated after deducting this investment risk reserve. So this is the eventual sum that is given to the depositor. So the banks, so there is displaced commercial risk with the profit equalization reserve, they are actually stabilizing the profits as such that the rates that the depositors receive, that they are not subject to much volatility. Okay. So let us now look at empirical evidence. So this paper is actually, it is a quite important and highly cited paper. So as you can see, it is already cited more than 1,300 times. It is probably one of the most cited Islamic banking papers. So what they do in this paper is they compare, this paper compares the rates of Islamic deposits with the rates of conventional deposits. And this for the Malaysian banking system. So they compare Islamic investment rates with the conventional deposit rates on savings as well as on time deposits with various maturities. So ranging from 1 month until 12 months, 1 year. And the sampling period is from 1995 until 2004, which makes, if you count this on a monthly basis, so they have 109 observations for each series. Be aware of the last bullet point. The market share of Islamic banks end of 2004 in Malaysia was 10.5%. So 10.5% of the total assets belongs to Islamic banks, 2004. Okay. So if you look at the average balance sheet of an Islamic bank in that period, we can notice that the asset side, I'm talking about this side, right? We can notice that the asset side is mainly composed of a murabaha agreement, so cost plus financing, rather than mudaraba or musharaka. And as you know, the mudaraba agreement or the musharaka agreement, they are actually more in the spirit of the profit and loss sharing agreement that Islamic banks are more supposed to rely on. However, as you can see in this, so for this time period, the sum of both, they are actually quite marginal, very marginal. So the sum of both is about 0.5%. However, the focus of today is not the asset side. The focus of today is more the liability side. So it is about the sources of funds and mainly about this one, savings accounts and investment accounts. There are two types in general. There are two types of deposits within Islamic bank. You have the Wadia contract, which actually, so the trustee, so the depositor in this context, allows the bank to use the assets while the asset is in the possession of the bank, with the condition that these assets will be returned to the depositor when it is asked by the depositor. The Amana contract is a bit more rigid. Here, the depositor, so the trustee, so the depositor, and then you also have the trustee, which is the bank. The bank here cannot use the asset. So it must simply safeguard this asset. So the Wadia contract, and the Wadia contract, the bank can use the asset, but it needs to give this asset back to the depositor when demanded. In the Amana contract, the bank can even not use this asset. It just needs to keep it safeguarded. So this is the Wadia contract. Of course, now you can say the Wadia contract. So what happens within this agreement? So the depositor signs a contract with bank, and it deposits a certain amount of money to the bank. And it gives permission to the bank to make use of funds. And of course, in the third stage, the bank uses this money for various investment purposes. Now, will the depositor earn some money? This depends on the discretion of the bank. So the bank can pay out the depositor in the form of gifts, like in hiba, like, in hiba form. So, but this is entirely based on the discretion of the bank. If the bank decides not to pay out any money, then the depositor will not earn anything. You also have this investment account. So here in the investment account, this is like entering into a profit and loss sharing agreement with the bank. So what happens here? The depositor deposits a certain amount of money with the bank, and this, for example, for a specific period. Suppose in this example, the maturity is 1 year and the agreed profit ratio is 70 to 30. So the bank uses this money for various investment purposes. If they make profit, 70% of the profits will be shared among the depositors, and the bank keeps 30% of this profit. However, if there is a loss, the loss is entirely borne by the depositors. So why do I explain this? Because the empirical paper is based on these concepts. Look at this. So as said earlier, what happens here? Okay. So they compare the rates of investment deposits, which are for Islamic banks, with those of term deposits, which are in connection with conventional banks. They are comparing both of the rates. Of course, as said earlier, this has different maturities for 1 month. This one is for 1 month. But they can also compare investment deposits with 3-month maturity with those of conventional deposits with 3-month maturity, and so on. 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and then you have this Wadia contract, which are actually the savings or current deposits. The Wadia savings account. Now, if we look at this table, okay, what we see is the following. Let us now compare the average rate of returns for both types of deposits, Islamic deposits as well as conventional deposits. What do we see here? We see that Islamic investment rates are on average significantly lower than the conventional deposit rates. Look at this. And the differences, which are actually indicated by those stars, they are highly significant. So Islamic investment rates, so Islamic banks, they pay on average less than conventional deposits. This is possible. But what about the following? Let us now compare the standard deviation of those returns, so the riskiness of those returns. And this is the strange thing. Actually, the rates of conventional deposits are more risky than the rates of Islamic deposits. So the volatility of Islamic investment rates are lower than those of conventional deposit rates. Isn't this strange? Why? Because this is quite counterintuitive. Because Islamic deposits, they are based on a PLS, on profit and loss sharing framework. They should have normally higher risk than conventional deposits, right? But empirical evidence shows that in practice, this is not the case. Now, a possible reason for this, for these results, is that the returns of Islamic deposits are linked to the deposit rates offered by the conventional banks. And this is what we see here. Look at this. The Islamic investment rates, they are highly correlated with the conventional deposit rates on a maturity matched basis. As you know, for those who understand a little bit of statistics, correlation does not tell us anything about causation, right? So it might be the case that Islamic rates are influencing the conventional rates, but it might also be the case that the conventional rates are influencing the Islamic rates. So this is the second part of the analysis. What the authors do then is they are conducting a Granger causality test. With the Granger causality test, it is possible to determine whether the changes in Islamic investment rates are influencing the changes in conventional deposit rates, or is it the other way around? Do the changes in conventional rates influence the changes in Islamic rates? So these are the results. I have summarized it. I have tried to be as clear as possible. What they do is the following. So they test whether the null hypothesis, is the following. Islamic investment rates do not cause adjustments in the conventional rates. So they don't influence the conventional rates. If this null hypothesis is rejected, this would mean that Islamic investment rates do cause adjustments in the conventional rates, right? So if this null hypothesis is not rejected, this means that Islamic rates do not influence the conventional rates. And the same reasoning also holds from the perspective of conventional rates. The null hypothesis for the conventional rates is that they don't influence Islamic rates. Rejecting that null hypothesis would mean that the conventional rates do influence the Islamic rates. What we see with the results is that conventional rates, so changes in conventional deposit rates, they cause the changes in Islamic rates. But it is not the other way around. Islamic rates don't influence the conventional rates. Now, this is actually giving an indication that this is displaced commercial risk, because banks are adjusting their profits as such that the Islamic investors receive more or less the same amount as what conventional depositors would earn, right? So this is, but I have a side note on this, and I have been thinking about this. If you look at this, I will show you this one. End of 2004, the market share of Islamic banks was only 10% of the total assets within the banking system. This is 2004. And as you can imagine, so they started from 1995. So actually, the average market share is even in this sample is even less than 10%. But if you look at the current situation, if you look at the market share of Islamic banks now in Malaysia, it is almost 40%. My question is the following. Is this connection, this lead-lag relation, still, does this still hold? Because end 90s, begin 2000s, the market share of Islamic banks was still limited. So who are then the price setters? I believe the price setters are there, the conventional banks. But given the current situation, the market share of Islamic banks is almost 40%. Is this lead-lag relationship still valid? And it might be even the case that suppose that the market share of Islamic banks exceed that of 50%. Then it might be the case that displaced commercial risk might be borne by conventional banks, because the price setters would then be the Islamic banks. I'm just brainstorming, to be honest, and I want that the audience also think about this issue. So what is the conclusion? So textbooks, they mention that displaced commercial risk is entirely borne or unique by Islamic banks to Islamic banks, and empirical evidence confirms this. However, it might be the case that displaced commercial risk is not unique to Islamic banks. It might be depending on the market power of Islamic banks. Thank you. Are there any questions? What time is it, by the way, Dr. Mohammed? Oh, okay.
Thank you very much, Doctor. It's half an hour. Yes.
Okay.
Just, so no problem. We can take some questions.
Definitely.
Or comments from the audience, our online guest. So if you have any question, please, you may write in the question box, or you may raise your hand. We can switch on microphone for you.
So the entire message, Dr. Mohammed, is that it might be that, depending on the market share of the respective banking segments, it might be that the displaced commercial risk is just, because of their small market share. So if Islamic banks become very large in a country, it might be the case that this displaced commercial risk is falling on conventional banks. That is the you know, that is the main message of today's talk.
Yeah. So do you think, Doctor, this risk in almost all the Muslim countries, like mostly Islamic banking sectors in example, Malaysia, Bangladesh, is the same, even in Bahrain?
Yes. No, this is a good point. This has been studied for many countries, this lead-lag relationship, and it is confirmed that Islamic banks follow conventional rates for many countries. I don't know for Bahrain specifically, but again, look, it has been shown for Turkey, but in Turkey, the market share of Islamic banks is also below 10%. No, actually. So, but you know, Malaysia, the Islamic banking market share is becoming larger. So I am not sure that this connection still holds today.
So if there are any question, oh, okay, Muhammad Zahrani. Yes, brother. Muhammad, please welcome you. Brother Muhammad Zahrani, we switch our microphone for you. So no more question, no. From any participation from our online guest.
I see one hand raised.
Yeah.
Doctor, there is one
Yes.
hand raised, but I don't know who that
Yeah,
is.
I already permitted and I switch on microphone for him, but I think he is not here. Muhammad Zahrani.
No questions. Are there actually PhD students in Islamic banking and finance among the attendees?
Yes, yes. Most of them from the areas of Islamic banking and finance.
Okay.
Ana Muhammad Zahrani, yes, okay. Anyhow, we already posted the link of slides in the chat group, so you may download it from the chat group. So any more question or comment or any participation from our online guest, please? You may write, okay, we can see one question. Yes, Basiru, Mr. Basir, why the investment risk reserve is considered against the spirit of the investment account?
Maybe I wasn't that clear there. I was just telling that this one, I need to go back. This one, right? So no, it's not against the spirit. What I wanted to say there is, look, in a Mudaraba agreement, the profits are shared by the depositor and the bank, right? But theoretically, the losses are borne only by the depositor. The profit equalization reserve, this reserve is related to the profits. So this reserve is actually taken out from both the bank and the depositor, while the investment risk reserve is only take because that is to the, you know, that is about the risk of losing something. So that reserve is only taken out of the pocket of the depositor. And that is what I'm showing you here. That, look, the bank has the share in profits after, you know, setting aside the profit equalization reserve, while the depositor only gets its share after setting aside not only the profit equalization reserve, but also this investment risk reserve. Just from the perspective of, you know, losses are borne entirely by the depositor, in theory, of course.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor, for the clarification. Thank you, Mr. Bashir, for your question. Any more question or comment or participation from the guest? We are waiting. for more questions or participation?
They might email me. They have my email address, right, Dr. Mohammed? I think.
Yeah, in the slides, I think we already provided the details.
Yeah, they can find it out anyway.
Okay, I think so. There is no more question. So we thank you very much for joining us, our online guest, dear brothers and sisters. Thank you very much for joining us in this session, as usual in all the sessions, both in Arabic and English. So thank you very much, and especially on behalf of our Islamic Economics Association of the Kuwait University, I would like to thank our Dr. Mustafa Disli for your effort and time, and for this informative and very important lecture on the commercial risk. So we thank you very much, Doctor, and we are always honored to have you in our platform. And inshallah, we hope to see you again in upcoming programs, inshallah. So our special thanks to our management of Nadal Iqtisad Islami, including Dr. Adil, Dr. Ala Al-Ubaid, and all the brothers and sisters in association. And inshallah, see you soon in upcoming any session again. And Dr. Mustafa, if you have any concluding remarks.
Yes, Doctor, thank you for having me. It's always an honor to present here. I just had wished that the audience is a bit more expressive, but inshallah they can email me if they have queries, if they have questions about their Islamic banking research, etc. We will be happy to help, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you very much, Doctor. And with that, we conclude today's session here. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام.
سعيا لخدمة طلبة العلم والارتقاء بمستوياتهم، يسر نادي الاقتصاد الإسلامي الإعلان عن منصة مدارج لإصدار الشهادات، بوابة خاصة لكل طالب. إمكانية التحقق من مصداقية الشهادات، إمكانية تغيير الاسم. كيف تعمل المنصة؟ بعد حضورك إحدى المحاضرات التابعة لنادي الاقتصاد الإسلامي، يقوم النادي بإنشاء حساب شخصي لك، ثم تصلك رسالة إلكترونية عبر البريد تحتوي على رابط المنصة، اسم المستخدم، كلمة المرور. قم بالضغط على رابط المنصة، ثم أدخل اسم المستخدم كما هو موضح في الرسالة، وأيضا كلمة المرور. ثالثاً، اضغط على شهاداتي. بعد الدخول إلى لوحة التحكم الخاصة بك، قم بالضغط على شهاداتي. هنا سوف تظهر لك جميع الشهادات الخاصة بك. بإمكانك الضغط على تحميل لتحميل الشهادة. كما يمكنك تعديل الاسم بالضغط على تعديل الاسم الكامل وكتابة الاسم الصحيح. انتبه، يسمح لك بتعديل الاسم الكامل مرة واحدة فقط. الرجاء التأكد من كتابة الاسم الصحيح. بعد ذلك قم بالضغط على حفظ. كما يمكنك تعديل كلمة المرور وإدخال كلمة مرور قوية. تم تسجيلك في منصة الشهادات بنجاح. مرحبا وأهلا بك في منصة مدارج الخاصة بشهاداتك في نادي الاقتصاد الإسلامي. شارك الآن وارتق معنا بسلم عضويات النادي. نادي الاقتصاد الإسلامي، التأصيل والتميز.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه، وبعد.
نشرف باللقاء بكم في موائد النادي العلمية، ونسعد بأن نزف إليكم مواعيده الأسبوعية خلال شهر يونيو بحول الله تعالى
من واحة العلم والمعرفة جامعة الكويت، ومن منارتها الرقمية نادي الاقتصاد الإسلامي.
تكامل وتناسق وتناغم في المواضيع مع التنوع والثراء.
فيا طالب العلم، إن نفسك إذا عودتها البطالة اعتادت، وإن عودتها العمل والجد والسهر سهرت وجدت وعملت.
ونهمس في أذن كل طالب علم بقول القائل: كن عالما في الناس أو متعلما أو سامعا، فالعلم ثوب فخار، من كل فن خذ ولا تجهل به.
وأن إنقاذ الناس من الضلالة وإخراجهم من الظلمات إلى النور أفضل قربة، فلأن يهدي الله بك رجلا واحدا خير لك من حمر النعم.
حياكم الله، أحيوا العلم والأدب، وانشروا العلم بين العجم والعرب.
واعلموا أن من سلك طريقا يلتمس فيه علما سهل الله له به طريقا إلى الجنة.
The programs and activities usually cover a wide range of areas in Islamic banking, microfinance, insurance, capital market, equity market. The features are Sharia principles of Islamic finance, the nature of contracts, products and services provided by Islamic banking.
لقاءات ثرية في انتظاركم، ومحتوى يرتقي لتطلعاتكم.
توضع روابط التسجيلات لحضور برامجنا يوميا على قنواتنا ومواقع التواصل الاجتماعي للنادي، فلا تترددوا في حضورها واحتساب أجرها وتحصيل نفعها، فإنها رياض الجنان.